Now, I'd like to turn to our fourth panellist, if I may, who is Rowena Fulufanga, sitting right over here. And Rowena is a lecturer in the Department of Design and Visual Arts here at Unitec and is the Pacific Islander coordinator for the department. So Rowena's been busy thinking about the Pacific Island dimension to the new structure. So over to you.
Tai lava, and kia ora, and support of Te Reo Week. Thanks, Rod, for that. It's been interesting. I've had a week's notice, so it's been a week of procrastination and 36 hours of researching Supercity. I have to kind of point out, I guess, my position in terms of where I'll be kind of speaking from won't necessarily be a consultative Pacific view. I have few colleagues who are even interested in the Supercity discussions and quite cynical, so I've kind of had to take my cynical hat off for this discussion. In saying that, it's been quite interesting. I think last week's audience, for someone who's quite visual, I did a quick research around the room, and I seem to be the only Pacific Islander sitting in the actual audience, and with very little people on tweeting or Twitter or whatever it's called. On Facebook, one of 500 billion or something. It kind of dawned on me the freakiness in terms of the stats that Rod is so good at punching out when he needs to. That's 37% of Aucklanders and Auckland population were born outside of this country, and obviously being a Pacific educator and having Pacific parents, it's quite an overwhelming number of people who aren't actually reached. So it's great to have these discussions, but I guess my biggest concern is how are we accessing these people, how are we accessing our Pacific communities, and how are we going to even get a voice when our own tangata whenua haven't got a seat, have no reo on this council and on this proposed structure. I have to apologise, I was reading the wrong report. I think I speak for most average Aucklanders. Everyone's gone cynical and totally negative against the Supercity, and having to do my research in the last few days, I've read the High Commissioner report and not the ATA structure. So I thought, oh, what's everyone talking about? You know, lack of seats. Yeah, there's 3 seats there, and hello, a few days ago. Well, it is quite sad, and I remember a colleague, David, from the head of the social practice, was in mourning, and I thought, okay, there's something wrong here. And there is. My heart sank for our Māori people, our Māori cousins, you know, and it also sank too for my Pacific community. I hear out there that there is of one Pacific person who's actually out there campaigning, ex-MP Awhanai, so I struggled to see how any of these conversations are really going to make light for any of our communities, and also for our minority communities. But the stats are overwhelming, and I know that a lot of our ministers have a lot of work too. I know the Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs are really trying to target a lot of our communities via email, via radio stations that are politically correct and government funded. And I guess I had to point that out because a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, was actually taken off the radio in the middle of one of his interviews, and it's quite interesting. We talk about democracy, free speech, but in the last 36 hours, I've really struggled to see how the structure is going to be better off for that minority group or the Pacific communities. But I have been open-eared throughout this whole process, and I guess you have to be, because at the end of the day, I've had Sir Ron in my ear, and Sir Peter last week, saying how positive and how great this could be if only Aucklanders work for it. Well, it's actually really, really hard. you just, and I consider myself an educated Pacific Islander or a Pacific person, and stats wise we don't highlight in the best stats. And how is it that this information is going to be even accessed by these communities? So that's my biggest worry. Yeah, so.
No, thank you for that perspective. What sort of steps could happen now before the election and in the very early days of the council starting out on November 1st that would start to give Pacific Island community a greater sense of excitement about what's going on and perhaps more of a sense that there's something in this for them?
Well, I think it's not going to work through email. It is definitely not going to work through email. I haven't seen much come through a lot of our Pacific churches, which is the villages for these communities, as we all know. And I know just in terms of political issues, they aren't really dealt through the council. The councils, I know I'm a Waitakere City person, so I've yet to see any kind of political issues being brought through any of the churches, really. Probably more through grassroots. I think there has been quite a few members of council working with the smaller grassroots communities, especially the Ranoi community. But then a colleague of mine who attends these, she's MPIA, Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs, has noted that out of the Ranoi community ward, none of these people live in Ranoi. So you've got you've got quite a few wards like that. I'm sure there's, Ranoi is not the exception in that case. But I just had to touch too on that whole, the 10,000 to 1 ratio. I'm not a numbers person. I'm an artist visualizer. So I kind of had to chuckle a little bit because it's 6:30 this morning. I was informed by my ministry friend that John Banks took a walk in Waitakere City Council, and 8 out of 10 people that he'd bumped into, no one actually knew who he was. So I find that very funny.
Yes, there are going to be some extraordinary communications issues for everybody involved to learn here. But no, thank you for that. Now, moving on to our next panellist, Duško Bogunović, sitting right here, is an associate professor here at Unitec in the architecture school and been very immersed for decades in architecture and urban planning and the like. And so I'm going to turn to Duško because to pick up on this very important point about the spatial plan. This is the one plan idea that came out of the Royal Commission, and thankfully it's survived the Rodney High proposals and the Select Committee process too, because it's a very bold attempt to get very well coordinated planning for our land use and development and environmental performance across the whole region. It's a very big shift in terms of how we deal with these issues, and the sheer complexity of it is going to be enormously challenging.